Hello, my name is Ryder Vanier, and I will be presenting to you my study on the effect of language and emotion on Spanish bilinguals. So just to give a brief introduction, the research question that guided my inquiry was, do bilingual speakers feel emotions differently when reflecting on emotional experiences depending on the language they are operating in? So obviously, just to go over two basic theories for this inquiry is the theory of linguistic relativity by Sapir and Whorf, which is the idea that the language you speak in some way, shape, or form determines how you perceive the world around you. And then the thinking for speaking theory by Slobin, which is that when we get ready to speak in a certain language, we prepare ourselves differently to fit the parameters of that language, so to speak. And now just the why for the audience is in an increasingly globalized society, multicultural communication could be helpful in like professional, even personal relationships. And then also an article by Aliouche demonstrated that it could help you grow as an individual and a human being as a whole. And then for the researcher, this is important to me because in the process of learning a second language, I've observed differentiating emotional feelings and especially dampening, I don't understand emotions as well in that second language as I do in my native language of English. And then just to address the gap, so there is a gap in emotional experiences in the field of linguistic relativity. And then also instruments such as interviews and positive and negative effect scores, which is basically just how you're feeling at the time. And then the aim of this study overall is to go over the effect of language on emotion as a whole. And then also to determine what the factors of cultural identity and language proficiency have on that. And then just some brief possible implications is the language emotional connection in bilingual populations. It could help us understand bilingual populations better. And obviously cross-cultural communication in professional and personal spaces. And then obviously language and emotion research and practice. So my review of the literature, so obviously we have the complex interplay between the Sapir and Whorf hypothesis. Basically language structures influence thought processes and obviously different ways of perceiving reality. And then a study by Pavlenko determined that there was actual mind restructuring really early on in your learning of the second language. And this alters cognitive processes and causes differing internalization of the culture you're learning about when you speak that language. And then a study by Wang and Wei and then Dillman et al. Determined that there's actually emotional dampening, which relates to what I was talking about earlier, what I was experiencing. So early on in the second language process, there's emotional dampening. You don't understand the emotions as well as you do in your native language. And then the CAT theory, or the conceptual act theory by Barrett, determines that emotions are constructed based on language, culture, and personal experiences. And that language plays a crucial role. And then together, these theories just suggest that language, culture, and emotions are deeply intertwined. So, and then to go over my methodology, my design was mixed methods, which was determined to be the best option given previous research in the field by Dewaldi and Pavlenko. So I decided to go with interviews and positive and negative effect schedules. So a positive and negative effect schedule is essentially a scale, and it determines how the positive effect is how positive you're feeling, and a negative effect, and it gives scores of that. So basically, it just determines your mood at the time. And then I also decided to go with assessing the intensity and frequency of emotional markers. And the emotional marker is basically like happy, sad, or whatever. So, and I took these from the interview transcripts and counted them up and made graphs. And then my sample and recruitment, a study by Mason proved that 10 interviews is sufficient enough, provided that there are no new novel insights after a while. And then the recruitment, I did snowball sampling by word of mouth after I talked with one of my friends. And then a quick procedure rundown. Participant would come in, they would fill out a PANAS form. Then I would interview them in English with these 4 questions on the right. Then I would have them fill out a PANAS right after that. And then I would go into the Spanish interview, and then they would fill out one more PANAS form. So just to go over the questions, my mentor study was Sakaki et al. And essentially, they were investigating the relationship between curiosity and well-being in old age. And my questions are similar to his in the fact that, except they don't talk about curiosity, talk about emotions. So one of the questions is, can you describe a time recently when you felt really happy, which is a positive question, and then a memorable question from the childhood, and then a stressful question, and then I gave the final question open to interpretation for them, which is a story about themselves, which is important. In my analysis steps, I decided to go with thematic coding, inductive thematic coding, and let the themes come out to me from the interview transcripts that I transcribed, which was shown to be effective in Diwali Pavlenko study, which is also another mentor study of mine. And then quantitative analysis of the emotional markers, creating graphs and stuff after I counted them all up from the transcripts. And then the PANAS, and then correlating those together with thematic coding. So my results for the qualitative sector, 3 major themes came out to me from the inductive thematic coding process. One of them was happiness from relationships and achieving goals. The second one was stress and anxiety surrounding major life transitions and occurrences. And then the third theme was strong connections to family and cultural identity. And I'll just go over a quick example from a stressful occurrence, which was from participant A, where he stated, I remember that they stopped us almost every 4 kilometers. I didn't know if they were federal. I didn't know if they were members of the cartel. I remember being very, very stressed at that time. And they were just recounting an experience in Mexico when they were visiting a province there. Then my results from the quantitative sector, from the positive and negative effect forms, I found between English and Spanish, there was a greater increase in positive effect in the Spanish part, and a decrease in negative effects. So overall, the participants were feeling better according to this data from the PANAS scores after the Spanish interview. And then the frequency of the emotional markers of happy, anxious, stressed, and excited were common between the English and Spanish interviews, but proud was more frequent in Spanish. And then the intensity of the emotional markers, there was higher averages. So the intensity was ranked from a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and then 5 being the highest intensity. So the higher averages for happy, nervous, anxious, stressed, and proud all together were higher in Spanish after the Spanish interview. So just to go over the PANAS scores quickly, we have the English sector, and then in the Spanish sector, on average, the green parts, which are the positive effects, are higher, and the negative effects are lower on average between all 10 participants. And then these are the graphs for the frequency of the emotional markers, which in English, so in Spanish, proud was at 4, and English, proud was only at 1, so that's a big difference, and the other ones were pretty similar. And then the intensity average from 1 through 5 was quite different. Like happy in Spanish was 4.1, but in English it was only 3. So a lot of the emotional markers were much stronger after the Spanish interview. So this leads us to our discussion. What could all this possibly mean? So essentially the Spanish interviews seem to elicit more emotionally intense responses, which similar findings were found in Jezijanska's and Skolin's study. And then native language facilitates a more prideful feelings and cultural identity expression. So they feel more proud when they're speaking in their native language, which most of the participants speak this language at home and with their family, so they're more fluent in it. And then obviously the stress around life transitions was, when I asked them the stressful question, they mostly talked about life transitions, since we're teenagers and college is coming soon, which Eccles, in his study, found out that when asked our certain age group of 16 to 18, that's what they talked about mostly was life transitions. So, and then there was more muted English expressions. There wasn't as much emotion in the English expressions, since some of them were more fluent in Spanish, which was sort of paralleled in Duolingo Duolingo's study. And then there's the uniqueness of the emotional marker proud, which was more pronounced and apparent in the Spanish sector, which could indicate that they have more resonance with Spanish and that they're more proud to speak it because it's their native language. So, and some possible implications could be native language use in counseling and therapy to get to treat clients better, and then obviously supporting cultural identity of bilingual speakers to enhance better well-being, and then communication in the education and workplace, so you can foster better connections with bilingual speakers around you. And then the main limitations of the study, which there was quite a few, is obviously the sample size. Sample size of 10, you can't generalize that to a bigger population. And participants, the demographics, they're all from a singular high school and in the Phoenix area, and they're all of Latino descent, so there's not much diversity in the participants. And then obviously the measures used to collect the data, which was self-report surveys, and then retrospective recall from the interviews. So maybe the participants just wanted to get out of there faster, so they did not as meaningful answers as some of the other ones, or they just aren't as interested in it, so they get different varying levels of responses. And then obviously the language proficiency and dominance between the participants. So some of them were less proficient in Spanish than they were in English, and some of them were more dominant in Spanish than they were in English, so varying levels of that. And then qualitative coding subjectivity. It was inductive, so I made up my own code book. So perhaps if another researcher were to replicate the study, they would not come up with the same themes that I have, because it's subjective. So some directions for future research should be a larger, more diverse sample, like age, perhaps including the other gender as well, because this was all boys. And then ethnicity as well. And of course, education standards, because these are all high school students. We should aim to go with perhaps college students, older folks, even younger students, if they're sufficiently bilingual enough. And then more objective emotion measures, like an EEG machine to measure brain activity during interviews, and brain imaging, and physiological responses such as pulse sensor or skin conductive sensor. So, and then obviously inclusion of other populations across the world. So the conclusion, the main takeaway, is that language has a big, multifaceted influence on emotion, or the results seem to implicate that, or indicate that. And then the mixed methods approach is more suited for the subject, because once the themes come out, you have to have data to support that and sort of bolster the qualitative themes that come out. And then cross-cultural emotional research. Obviously, it'll help future studies and their endeavors of cross cultures and how emotion plays a role in that. And then future direction, just to reiterate, education, workplace communication, cooperativity, and then of course there should be larger, more diverse samples next time, and some more methods, so such as like EEG machine, etc.
Terrific. You ready? Okay, we got a few questions for you, and then that'll wrap this up. So let's talk about your initial exploration. You had a curiosity about this, and then you read the scholarly conversation, and that led to your current research question. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So you had your initial curiosity about this idea, and then you read the scholarly information out there, and that led to your current research question. Tell us a little bit about that transition.
So initially, when I was having my curiosity about how language plays a role in emotion, I started reading up things, and I noticed that there was other people that were interested about this as well, and they actually ran studies on emotions and how they're affected by language. So essentially, it led me to my research question because I wanted to know the role that emotion plays in language and how they cooperate together. And there was, in the initial scholarly field, I felt there was a gap in how language, I felt there was a gap of how language affects the subjective experience and expression of emotions in bilinguals. So I wanted to explore that more.
Terrific. And then as a follow-up question on that, what are the real-world implications or consequences related to your findings? Who are these results for, and what should they take away?
So these results could be for therapists, and if they have a bilingual client, then they can help them get better treatment because they'll be able to understand their emotions better in that second language because their emotions will be more pronounced when they're speaking in their native language, as my results indicated. And another real world could be for you to just grow as a person, and because it's been shown, research has been shown, when you learn a second language, you not only expand your perspective, but you also expand how you perceive the world in a more positive way and more understanding of other cultures.
Okay, terrific. And then the final question is, you clearly obtained a number of skills while you were working on this project. So could you identify one of those skills and identify what else you could apply it to in the world,
Yeah. So, I think, in my opinion, the most important skill I obtained from this process was the ability to synthesize qualitative and quantitative findings and just conduct the research process in general, because I've never interviewed people before. I've never done anything like that. And so this skill gave me better time management skills because during the results process, I spent about 4 days, a couple hours each day spreading it out to effectively analyze my data and then synthesize those findings. So I believe this will help me in future endeavors such as writing grad papers or writing another research paper or iterations, because it will help me get through a process more efficiently than I did this time since it was my first time. And I'll be able to do it more effectively because I'll know how to interview people and conduct research.